Hey everyone, welcome to a new video, welcome to my channel. My name is Maaike. Today we are going to be having a look at my warm toned eyeshadow palette collection. I did a cool tone version of this video in February because cool tones have my heart. But I thought that perhaps we could do also one on warm tones and also one on colorful eyeshadow palettes before I show you my grand old eyeshadow palette collection this summer. So that I will be doing that, but there of course are palettes that don't fit into either warm tones or cool tones or colorful because some of them have it all. So it means certain things will get left out of these videos, but I thought this could be fun. I don't know, and I have a lot more here than I had expected, to be sure. I do have to say that this is what in my brain I would categorize as a warm tone. So maybe your definition is narrower or wider or who knows. But these are the things that if I think of warm tone palettes in my collection, I just went through the whole thing. These are the things I reach for. There are a few palettes in here, such as this one here, that I decided to keep around for this video when I declutter them. So there's like 4 palettes in here that I know I will get rid of after I film this video. Not because they're bad quality, but because, you know, in terms of warm tones, I have enough. And it's not something I reach for a whole lot. But there are a few palettes in here that I absolutely love. So I just wanted to talk about stuff. There are a couple of things like this stack and also over here where I sort of had to stack like brands together. But everything else is single file, and this is also it. For my cool tone video, I had like another one of these that I had to lay out. So this includes everything that I would find a warm tone that's also like a color. So in the cool tones, I first did the neutrals and then the colorful shades. But in here, I would say we have a mix of all the warm tone neutrals or palettes that have just warm tone neutrals in my head, as well as the ones that have more color to them. And yeah, so we have a mix here of indie stuff and high-end, and we've got some drugstore stuff in here too. So let's just get cracking. And I think I'm not sure where to start. Where should we start? Shall we just start with an OG? I think everybody loves Modern Renaissance. Mine is, apart from this smudge on the front, it's like in pristine condition for some reason. And also the inside. Not exactly one that I used a ton in my collection, you could say. And the reason for that being is the fact that by the time this palette came out, I already had a lot of the more neutral shades that everybody was going gaga for. I think most people pan these 6 shades. Like, that's what I see most people do. Why I wanted to own this palette is Love Letter, Venetian Red, and Red Ochre. So the reds and the berries. And that's my go-to look with this palette in the fall time. When it's berry season for me, I go into those 3 shades and I do 3 different looks easily with just those 3 shades. Sometimes I pull in this matte brown or this more like shimmer here, and I vary with the shimmers that I use between Vermeer and Primavera. I use a combination of these 2 or maybe that cool tone to go into the crease. The only shade in here that I really don't understand is Real Gar. That sort of orangey shade is definitely too warm for my liking. So I'm not a big fan of that. But these berries, I love. That's why I have this palette. That's what I keep it around for. I love playing around with this in the fall time. And in a similar vein, I actually purchased this because I love the berries so much in the Modern Renaissance. I bought myself the Lime Crime Venus 2, which looks like this. And what I have dubbed this on my channel for like multiple times is the Modern Renaissance on steroids. So this gives you all the berry shades, but without the brown neutrals, say for perhaps this one and that one. But everything here has a berry undertone, and that's why I love it. For me, this is a lot more perfect than Modern Renaissance, and I have to say that I reach for this a lot more now that I want to do like berry looks. I reach for this more so than the Modern Renaissance because it just gives you a lot more options. You get some nice bright pops. The shimmers in here aren't super intense, so Vermeer and Primavera perhaps if you combine it with this, it would be even lovelier. But yeah, I own this because the berries in the Modern Renaissance is where it's at for me. And then we have the Blushing Berries. And the Blushing Berries by Dose of Colors, I thought we could stick to berries for a minute, is a palette that I, again, like the Modern Renaissance. If I'm in that berry mood, this is what I reach for. I like layering this over a cream shadow I own by Chanel, and then topping it off with one of my Stila Glitters and Glows. This is a very nice 5-pan curated palette. Love it. And then, of course, as with the Cool Tone video, I realized I had forgotten to pull in a palette. So we're talking about berries. And I'm like, of course, Urban Decay Naked Cherry. How could I forget? So this palette is really stunning. I hope the mirror doesn't blind you. Let me grab a palette here so that we can fix that. So this, I think, is a stunning palette. Again, I don't reach for this a whole lot, but what I like about this palette in particular is how you get the berry shades here and the peachy ones here, and I feel they make for very interesting combinations. So that's why I do really like this palette. It's not the most versatile. I feel the Lime Crime XL, that just takes the cake. That is giving me all the berry vibes that I would possibly need. So yeah, this is a stunning palette, but not one I reach for a whole lot. Since that was an Urban Decay palette, let's just talk about Urban Decay. The Naked One. To me, for me, this has always been a bit too warm toned. So for me, this palette has never been perfect. As you can see, it's barely used, and I have had this for years. There are no dents in this. There are no, like, I'm not even close to hitting pan. And that's because if I go for this palette, I kind of go for these shades here, and Sidecar perhaps, but I didn't really like these like darker shades all that much, and this is, of course, doesn't have a lot of mattes, but I feel that Naked and Buck are good enough for my complexion to do like crease shades, so I have what I need. But for me, this is a bit too yellow, not my favorite. This is like a really nice bronze, so this for me is a look, and then deepening it up with Dark Horse. And then I definitely discovered Toasted later on, like these like more purpley shades. I just didn't go for this as much, you guys. The Naked 2 is the one where it was at for me when it comes to these older Urban Decay palettes, and not this one. I am someone who likes the Reloaded a lot more. It's not in this selection because in my brain, the Reloaded is a lot less warm than the original Naked. I feel that's more of a neutral palette. Naked Heat. So Urban Decay's Naked Heat was the palette that really had, like, people fell in love with Urban Decay again for a minute, and for me, I've never fallen out of love with Urban Decay. I think their quality is very consistent. Their shadows have always been more on the buildable side than Boom Pigment, and especially that latter, like Boom Pigment, is what a lot of influencers seem to be saying is a sign of good quality eyeshadow. I disagree. I think good eyeshadow is one that you need to build up because it gives you a lot more control over what you can do. But that's just me. This I like. I like this a lot more in terms of like warm tones and like oranges than that Real Gar shade in the Modern Renaissance, because while this is orange, it leans more reddish toned orange, and that on me just works a lot better. If I wear this, my eyes look a bit more green, and that's why I like this. And I think that these four mattes are absolutely stunning. I just wish that these two mid-tone shimmers were more distinct once you put them on the eye. I feel that they translate very similarly. But my favorite warm tone palette by Urban Decay is the Naked Honey. And I actually did a video with this palette not too long ago, actually when it came out last fall. I did a video comparing this to everything that the Naked line has and had to offer, and just to see how this ties in together. And I think that if, for instance, you were to pair this with the Naked Heat, I think you would get the versatility out of the Naked Heat that a lot of people are missing in that. But for me, as a standalone palette, this worked really, really well, because in terms of warm tones, what I can get down with the most is mustardy browns. That, in terms of warm tones, is my jam. So this gives me all these mustards in the mattes. These two shades in the middle, like if I cover these two up, you can see that it's mainly, like, I don't get why this is called the Naked Honey. It's more like the Naked Mustard to me. But these two yellow tone shades, if you take them out of the equation, you get a very neutral palette with just some interesting pops of yellow in here. but it's not a true yellow toned eyeshadow palette, I feel. It's definitely still on the neutral warm side for me, and mustard browns look good on me in terms of clothing, but they also look good on me in terms of eyeshadow. And that actually is going to give me my link to these 4 Zoeva palettes in the back that I was using this one of to cover the mirror, because I feel that if you're looking for a drugstore dupe of the Naked Honey, you should look into the Zoeva Blanc Fusion. And this is a palette that is super overlooked. Zoeva as a brand is completely overlooked, I feel. But this is perhaps a little bit more cool toned in the mattes, but you do get these like yellow toned shimmers, and this shade right here called Late Bloomer. Oh my word, you guys, it's absolutely stunning. So I feel that you could get a very similar look out of this. It's again going to give you those yellow tones. It's a stunning palette. It's a really, really gorgeous palette. Perhaps a little bit more on the neutral side as well, but stunning. And I feel that these other 3 Zoeva palettes are also quite warm toned. In terms of super duper warm, we get the Caramel Melange. And some people I've heard say that theirs isn't that great, but mine is fine. You get these like reddish tones, like neutrals. This shimmer called Liquid Center is like, if you bite into a caramel, that's what that inside, that's what it looks like. Love it. You get a soft gold and this like peachy tone shimmer. These 3 shimmers aren't the greatest, but this shimmer is just where it's at for me. Whenever I do a look with this, I kind of go in with these 3 shades and then that on the lid. Stunning. And as you can see, I did dug my nails into this because I think of these 3 like warmer tone palettes, this and the Blanc Fusion are my most used ones. Spice of Life, this is one that they came out with a little bit later, and this is interesting because it has mainly warm tones, especially on this side of the palette, but then you do get this really interesting, more cool tone pop. And there's actually another palette that I feel has that, and I like that a lot. But yeah, over here you get this like copper, and you get these like warmer tone browns and a bronze, and this like, well, maybe this is a bit more cool toned as well, but this is like a dirty greeny gold, which I like. So this is also an overly mostly warm tone neutral palette. And in terms of Zoeva's tradition of adding duochromes, this is also one of the only ones that has a duochrome. That cool tone shimmer is very similar to ColourPop's Glass Boule. And then over here we have the Cocoa Blend, and the Cocoa Blend is one that a lot of people raved about. This is very warm toned. This is the only cool tone you get in here. It has a cranberry shade and again a couple of like bronzes and golds. This is a really stunning neutral palette, and I think that just these earlier chocolate bar kind of things by Zoeva, they are now a little bit dated in terms of their color story. I don't see anybody wearing cranberries again, but when this came out, like cranberries had a moment. But maybe it will come back someday. But this is just still, till this day, I think a really good neutral one to have. At the time when I bought this I felt was too dark on me. I just wasn't really good at eyeshadow yet. I mean, it's a learning curve for all of us, right? So this I feel by now I can probably make work a lot better. So I need to go back to this sometime. And then I have one more Zoeva palette, and that's the Premier palette from them. And this is like the packaging on this. It's so stunning. It's like Art Deco, sort of like 1920s, that film noir, like kind of early Hollywood kind of inspired. Super stunning. This again has a really pretty duochrome in the corner, but especially like you get some mauves, but they are more like the warmer tone mauves. And then these 4 shimmers at the top are also very warm toned. So I feel that this is again a warm tone neutral palette that, I mean, you could pick any of these 5 Zoeva palettes and I think you would be happy if you're looking for warm tones, but that's just me. Let's talk about that palette I mentioned, saying I have a palette that has warm tones with a pop of something cool. And that's why I ended up buying the Color Rain Queen of Hearts. This was, of course, super duper raved about by so many people. And I just didn't get the fuss at first. I was like, okay. But this is warm tones, but then it has this really stunning cool tone shimmer. And when I spotted this in store, I swatched this and I was sold. This together with the purples goes really well, but also like these warm tones with the purple go really well too. This like, what's it called? Noble Woman shade is absolutely stunning. It's a very unique one. And then you just get a couple of mattes that just round off the look. I now get the hype for this palette, but because it has mainly warm tones with that pop of purple, I don't reach for this because there is actually another palette that is actually one of my all-time favorite palettes, you guys, that does the same thing for me. And that would be this one. The Huda Beauty Desert Dusk. And since I already owned this before, I don't reach for the color Rain all that much. This palette, you guys. Oh. I mean, this is stunning. This to me is a fall palette, and I actually, when I was using this last fall, I was using more of these like cool tone shades, like here this cashmere shade, and then combined with musk makes for such a lovely, like very everyday look. If I want to amp it up, I can go in with some of these red tones, and that's why I like this palette. This shimmer is more red toned, that shimmer is more red toned, saffron is more red toned. And I like if I have to go for warm tones, make them berries or reds, then I like them a lot better than a straight up orange like Blazing, for instance. That's the shade I use the least probably in this entire palette. But then you also get these like purpley shades in here. Super duper stunning. I really, really like this palette. I get so many different looks out of this, and I feel that this has a bit more going for it than the Queen of Hearts till this day, for me anyways. Speaking of warm tones with a pop of purple, the Hashtag palette by Violet Voss. I think this is a palette that was perhaps a little bit ahead of its time, because I feel that this color story is very similar to the Morphe and Jaclyn Hill Volume 2 palette that has just some brighter pops of pink, perhaps has some more brightness and magenta kind of shades, but the idea of these yellows and then golds with oranges, and then it goes into these like reddish cranberry shades into purples. I think that that idea was definitely something that was already on the market in terms of this palette. You get 5 mattes at the top. I have said many times before that this was a very disappointing palette for me because I feel it's just a bit overpriced for the quality you get. However, these shadows are lovely, and if I want to go for like those yellows or like those purples, I do still reach for this palette sometimes. So this is not one of my favorites. I would go for the Huda Beauty Desert Dusk if I want to go warm tones with purples, but this is a nice palette. So I mentioned Morphe and Jaclyn Hill. I only have the Morphe and Jaclyn Hill Vault. Those are the only Morphe shadows in my entire collection. I never really got the hype. The palettes are too big for me, but when she came out with these like little palettes, I was pretty happy. The ones I use the least from the Vault are the warm tones. This is the Ring the Alarm, and this I barely used. Like, this has barely been used. They are nice warm tones, just not really my cup of tea. And that's the only one that I wouldn't have bought, but the set was just as expensive as getting 3, so that's why I got the set. And then Armed and Gorgeous, in terms of warm tones, this I like a lot better because it has those like greens and like grungy sort of browns, like mustards again. So I do like this in terms of warm tones. It's just that in terms of quality in the Vault, this was my least favorite. The dark, was it Dark Matter? The like smoky eye one and then the purple one I think are better quality than this, especially this Top Secret shade. That green is actually the worst shade in the entire Vault, but I do really like this gold at the bottom here. That's called Classified. It's like a dirty olivey gold. Those are the only golds I like on myself. Well, let's just talk Monster Browns and olivey greens then, because the Gemini by Melt has that as well. And I haven't used this yet. How am I going to... Okay, I don't want to break the palette. Hold on. Like this. So I haven't used this yet. I've only swatched it so far because this is brand new to me. I only got this a few months ago and I'm still testing out a bunch of makeup. So this is still on my to try pile. I bought it because it has those greens and then those like mustardy browns. So stunning. So stunning. This is my kind of color story. Again, if I have to go warm tones, please give me something like this or the berries. And then let's just stick to Melt for a minute because I also have a stack. This is the Rust stack, and I believe they now do this in a palette I'm not mistaken. I haven't really been in the loop with new makeup releases, but I don't need that because I already own this. This is the shade Rot. It also comes with Rust. It comes with Rubbish, which is the best mustard brown matte on the planet. And then we have Antique, and we have Classic. So this is, I bought this because in terms of like just warm tone mattes, I don't really have any like true matte palettes that have that. So I thought that this could be a good addition to my makeup collection, and especially that Rubbish shade takes the cake. Okay, so now that we've covered all that, I just tried to condense everything down a little bit so that we know a little bit better what we're looking at. In terms of warm tones, I think that if it comes to neutrals, for me, this is a warm tone palette, the Lorac Pro 1, but some people find this very neutral. On me, this just looks very warm, and it mainly has to do with garnet and gold. Like, these two shimmers are perhaps more neutral, but for me, this also goes a bit too dark, so these 4 shades I never really use in this palette, and then everything else is quite light. This taupe doesn't really go with anything. Like, it's just a bit of a weird one for me, but in my brain, this works as a warm tone palette. But I think the Lorac Pro 4 is more like berry warm tones, so that's what I'm still interested in trying. And then a warm tone palette that I think is super overlooked is the Nude Beach palette by The Balm. I don't use my The Balm palettes all that much, but I do think they have really nice quality. They are not as expensive as, for instance, an Anastasia or a Urban Decay palette. So in terms of like what they have to offer, I just think it's a bit of a shame that not more people talk about them. And this is one that I therefore want to mention in this video. This is the Nude Beach. It's got some berry tones and then these warm tone browns and bronzes. This is a lovely color story, and this is one of the few like true warm tone neutral palettes where I feel I can use every single shade and it will look okay. Nothing is too warm, nothing is too dark, nothing is too stark against my skin tone, especially because you get these like more mauve-y shades. So I feel it just works better for me personally. So this has to be one of my favorite warm tone palettes, but as you can see, I haven't used it much. Yeah, let's just talk about Too Faced for a minute. So I have the Too Faced Just Peachy Mattes. And this one, I think I owned the Melt Rust Stack before I owned this. So that would make sense, right? Because before this, I really didn't have any warm tone mattes. And I feel that this is very warm tones because it's very peachy. Save for Chocolate Dipped, I feel that's more of a cool tone brown. And in terms of all of the matte palettes I have, this is one of my favorites. It's lovely quality. That Just Peachy shade is one of my favorites. Works really well as a transition on me. It's just that I don't really wear mattes as standalone palettes. So that's why something like the Melt Stack works better for me, because it's 5 curated shades, or like the Little Dose of Colors palettes. That's very nice and curated. This just gives me too many options, and I would only go into this palette for like 1 or 2 shades. Sticking with Too Faced for a minute, I think this is one of the most hyped up eyeshadow palettes in makeup history. The Too Faced Sweet Peach palette, of course. Who doesn't know this? Who doesn't own this? And who wasn't bummed out when they couldn't get their hands on it the first time round? I got this when it first released. I thought I was not going to be able to find it, but then I traveled to London and there they had it. So I snatched it up. As you can see, not something I use a lot. I mainly just go in this half of the palette and then these 2 browns. These shades are very dark and they all look the same on me. That green doesn't look green. Bellini I sometimes still like, but I just think for a peach palette, there isn't a lot of peach going on. The 2 shades I like the most are these 2 mattes and Nectar and Luscious. This has some really stunning shimmers. That's what I keep it around for. The one thing I hated about this palette the most, I can still smell it from here, it's the scent. And yet I still went on and bought the Gingerbread Spice palette when that first launched. Let me now use this to cover this up. Because I was just very intrigued with the color story, again, because it has some really stunning shimmers over on this side. Hot Toddy is really nice. That Gumdrop shade is super good too. It's just some of these shades I would never wear, like Spice is nice, I would not wear. But in terms of warm tones, it has a couple of really interesting shades, and this Spice Rum is a bit more cool toned. It's more on the taupey side. You get some purples. I just thought that, again, in terms of warm tones, this is sort of like more up my street than the Sweet Peach. So I do reach for this, especially in the fall time. This is definitely a fall time palette for me, but I felt that the next one, this Extra Spicy, was too similar to this, so that's why I didn't pick that up. So I started you off with ABH. Let's continue with ABH. I think the Subculture is also a warm toned palette. This is, well, nothing but warm tones. Teals are warm, this burgundy is a warm tone, that green is a warm tone, you get some mustards, warm tones. This khaki green is a warm tone. Everything is a warm tone. Maybe Mercury is the only thing that's not too warm, and maybe Rowdy too. I know that a lot of people like this. This is one of my favorite eyeshadow palettes by Anastasia. I bought mine later, so maybe I have the updated formula. I wouldn't know, but mine is fine. I think Axis is the worst shade to work with, but I don't mind putting effort into a shade this unique, because a true teal like this, not a lot of brands have it. So and if you have brown eyes like me, this is your color story. These are so grungy and still colorful, and like, I cannot see myself not owning this palette just because it's such a unique color story. And then we have the Soft Glam, and this is, of course, also quite warm toned, but it's definitely more rosy and perhaps a bit more pink toned. On me, I was surprised how well this worked. I initially wasn't going to get this when this first launched, because I was like, but then when the Norvina came out and that sort of swayed me to buy more ABH stuff, I decided to throw this one in the mix when it was on sale some time ago. And when I started using it, I was like, oh my, this is stunning. So this is, again, more like berry toned, and that's why it works. MUA is a brand that I like to try things from every once in a while. This is super affordable. I think this was only $4.99, and this has really nice quality. That matte red and that matte orange are super nice. It's just a very confusing palette, because what are those two grays doing in there? Like, can anyone tell me? And what this is missing is like a darker brown to really tie everything together. So that's why I ended up never using it after I reviewed this, which is why this was decluttered when I did my eyeshadow palette declutter. Palettes that I just can't get rid of are my Sleek palettes. I finally decluttered some when I did my eyeshadow palette declutter, but this Sunset palette, I mean, everybody claims that Morphe or whoever came out with warm tones in a pop of blue. This is one of the first palettes Sleek ever came out with more than a decade ago. You can no longer get it. It's discontinued, sadly. But it's got warm tones with a pop of blue. It is all shimmer, though. But this is lovely if you want to go for that sunset sort of eye. So stunning. And then they did sort of like what you could say is as an updated version. Currently they're not releasing a lot of eyeshadow palettes, but this was one when they still did. And this is the On the Horizon. And for me, this is like the updated version of the Sunset. So this is more like oranges and a navy, and there are just fewer browns and like cranberries in this. It's got more like greens, and this is just, again, a very sunset kind of eye. If you have these two and you combine them, ooh, so stunning. Milani, also something I decluttered, the Everyday Eyes eyeshadow palette in Earthy Elements. This was one of the first Milani eyeshadow palettes I tried. This is lovely quality. I just have those square palettes now that I reach for a lot more. So this has that orangey shade in the middle, of course, but not something I reach for a lot, but it was lovely quality. And then this one is hiding up here, this very shiny number, the Soph Extra Spice palette by Makeup Revolution. And this is, let me cover up the mirror, this is one of the best Makeup Revolution eyeshadow palettes on the market, quality-wise. It's just that it's so warm-toned, and then you get that really bright silver, which I don't understand. Like, that silver is one of the best silvers ever. So that was the reason why I hung on to this for such a long time. But I never reach for this because these are not my shades. This is just too red. That yellow is not the best. It's just a bit dark. It just all looked a little samey on my eyes. Lovely quality, great silver, unique color story for sure. Not something I reach for. That got decluttered, and this also got decluttered. This is the Lemon Drizzle palette by I Heart Revolution. And this I sort of got because I don't own ColourPop Yes Please. but I just now understand why I don't own ColourPop's Yes Please, because I've never used this. I've only ever swatched it, and then I was like, nah, not gonna happen. So this one also came from the declutter pile. Speaking of ColourPop, got some things over here. I do own the Dream Street by ColourPop. This is the only like 12 pan palette by them that I own at the moment. There is one on my wish list. And this is their Kathleen Lights collab, and it's got these like warmer tones, so I feel that especially this corner here is very warm toned, and then this is a little bit more like cool toned. I just really like the teals in here, and I like how you get, it's just a really interesting color story. In my brain though, it does pull more warm toned than neutral. And then the two warm tone palettes that I own from the monochromatic line, the Main Squeeze, I just did a video not too long ago where I tried all 10 of these in one giant, it's an hour long. I think it's a bit too long in the end, but hey, that's what I ended up with once I put everything together. But I did a look with each one, and I think I have to agree with everyone who left comments saying that the Main Squeeze was the one that looked best on me, which was a complete surprise because it's the most warm toned one of the entire line that I own. I skipped the Orangey Glad and the Baby Got Peach because I know I don't really wear peaches and oranges to begin with. But this reddish tone, oh, like the Naked Heat, this made my eyes look more green. And then the Aha Honey, I'm a bit nervous about this one because it may have cracked yet again, because this palette came slightly damaged. And the shades keep popping out every time I open this. So I've actually decided that I'm going to pop these out and repress them, and I'm actually going to take out the glitter because I didn't think it went very well with the rest of the palettes. I'm going to take out the glitter and see if these pans are just as big as the ColourPop singles, and then just stick one of my singles in here instead. And these two very fragile ones, this one is also a bit broken, I'm just going to take out of its pan, repress it, and hopefully it won't be as flaky and messy. I did really like this one too. Very nice yellow tone palette. In terms of yellows, I think it's quite versatile, and it's of course a bit more colorful than, for instance, the Naked Honey by Urban Decay. That's more brown toned. And then in terms of yellow palettes, actually I think I like this one even more than a ColourPop one. This is by Focallure, and this is their Smile palette. And the only reason why I like this better is because it's going a bit deeper than that one. It has a couple of really interesting shimmers. It also has a pressed glitter, but it's not as true yellow as the ColourPop one. But in terms of color story and what it brings, again, this together with the ColourPop, I think will be really nice, which is why I hung on to it. We just have a few more bits left. Speaking of like golds and yellow tones, let's just tackle this thing here. Natasha Denona Gold Palette. For someone who doesn't like warm tones, I did invest in this. I feel that this is a bit more neutral tone though. You get some mustards, but you get this really warm yellow gold. And that's the reason why for a very long time I didn't want to own this, because that just sort of draws your eye in, and it's not my favorite. But these neutrals over here, and this over here, and then that and that, I love. So there are 14 shades in here that I absolutely love. It's more warm toned, leaning for sure. But I feel like the textures in this, and oh, this palette just really, really, really lovely. I actually would like to get the Biba because I feel that's more neutral than this. But in terms of warm tones, if we're talking Homely Girl status, there is still one palette lying in front of you that I absolutely love that came completely unexpected to me. This one. The Saharan palette by Juvia's. And this is super warm. It's super duper warm, and it has this weird white bluey shifty shade that nobody understands, including myself. But that shade and that shade and that shade, if I have to go warm tones, I'm not even sure why. I've been saying I don't like oranges, but for some reason what's going on in here, and then the other shades, the shimmers that are in here, it just works really well on my complexion. Sticking to Juvia's Place then, the Festival palette and the Saharan 2. I don't own all Juvia's Place palettes. I, for instance, don't own the Warrior, which is of course neutral but also very golden toned. I don't see myself wearing all of them because some of the palettes are definitely more geared towards a darker skin tone, which I don't have. I was super surprised by these two, especially the Festival, because this looks like a color story that makes you go, huh? How? How is that going to work? These two work on me as transitions. These two pull neon on me. You've got a really nice bright pop of blue. This white, if this white would have been in the Saharan, even better. In the end, this worked so well, so well. It's like neutrals with a pop of color and just the right pop, you know? Love it. And then this one, also really stunning. This is the same sort of concept, warm tones with blues. And then you have these three mattes and everything else is shimmer. Those two, this one and that one, the only reason why I keep it around for. So stunning. And then I think a very wearable warm tone palette that's more orange toned is the Tartelette Toasted. I feel that this is a bit more neutral than the Naked Heat, but I feel that if I want to go warm toned, I should just go straight out like Main Squeeze, Naked Heat kind of stuff. This is a bit more neutral. I like my In Bloom so much better. What's this called actually? Toasted. But this Toasted palette is really lovely as well. That warm tone shimmer, Cold Flame, lovely. But Crackle is like a matte with glitter. Why? Why? If that had been just that shade, it would have been a much better palette in my opinion. And then I was covering the mirror with this. This is the Meet Matrimony palette by The Balm. Oh, I should have done this earlier perhaps, but oh well. This is a very warm tone palette. It also is very deep with these 4 shades translating almost the same on my eyes, but it's really good matte quality, which is what I keep it around for. It has a really good transition shade. This is one of those palettes that I sometimes reach for if I'm just a bit lazy and I just do like a very basic transition and then I put a glitter on the lid. Boom, you're done. The Feral palette by Menagerie, for me, this is definitely a warm tone color story, save perhaps for this pop of like teal. This was a palette that was revamped. It originally had 2 more neutrals here, and then they decided to put this in. Everything else is quite warm toned. Maybe this isn't, like these 2 are more cool toned, I feel. Everything else is warm tones. This has always smelled a bit funky, which is not what I like, per se. And you only get 3 shimmers, but oh my, the looks I did with this, you guys. This is such an inspirational color story to me. I love it. Love it, love it, love it, love it. And then I've got 3 quads, one by Dior, one by Charlotte Tilbury, and one by Chanel. So these are my luxury items, you could say. This Chanel quad is one where they started first doing mattes. They did this as a limited edition for fall. And it's got that red toned and everything else is perhaps a bit more neutral. Not something I reach for a lot, but it's a good one to have. This is called Candeur et Expérience. I never know what it's called. This is Charlotte Tilbury's La Dolce Vita. This was the first one that I bought. And it's definitely a bit more warm toned, but I love this around the holidays because this is just like one little look and then you pop that shimmer onto the lid with your fingers. It's really stunning. And I think actually that this Dior little quint is actually very similar. This was also a limited edition for fall, but this is again more that burgundy, cranberry kind of thing. We know by now that I like it. So, you guys, that's everything. Those were all the warm tones in my collection personally, and I think that I have plenty to go by, really. But yeah, let me know in a comment down below what your favorite warm tone palette is. I would love to know. Thank you very much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. Subscribe to my channel if you'd like to see more by me. I make 3 new videos a week on Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday, and I'm just trying to give you some lighthearted content in these trying times. So I hope you are well, that you're healthy, that your family is healthy, that you're safe and sound, and I hope to see you in my next video. Bye.